What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Daft Previews, and I'm here to give you the most comprehensive NBA player prop preview you are going to see on YouTube today. We're going back to business. We're going game by game. We're going through all the key players and all their key props. We're talking about matchups, their form lines. I'll tell you what I like. I'll tell you what I don't. And at the end of the video, check the pinned comment and you'll see all my final bets if you do choose to tell. Now, I do this every single day and I do it for free. And I do it to give you all the information that you need to make the best decision possible when it comes to betting. If you do want to support the channel, all I ask is you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and please watch it to the end. The more you watch it, the more likely YouTube is to push this out to others. Now, let's go. So straight out the jump, we're looking at the Brooklyn Nets versus the Orlando Magic. This team's pretty much complete, so we've got a lot of lines available. Now let's get into it. We'll start with the Orlando Magic first. Now, Jalen Suggs, let's look at his points prop because he's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. Let's see what the hell's going on over here. 7 out of his last 10, which is good. Against the Brooklyn Nets, he's gone under in 4 consecutive games, though. 1 out of his last 5. He does have a good matchup here against Brooklyn. They did play each other about 3 weeks ago, and he scored 8 points in that game. Orlando won by 30, but it wasn't because of Jalen Suggs. So I'd be a little bit hesitant to take that. He's lining up at point guard. There might be a chance for him to get some assists. Based on his last 10 games, he has hit this in 7 of the last 10. However, difficult matchup against the Nets, and he's gone under in 5 consecutive games against them. So I'm not saying to take the under. I'm just a little bit undecided on which way to go on that one. So 3-pointers, his line's at 1.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Does have a good matchup here. Brooklyn allow a lot of 3-pointers made to point guards. But Jalen Suggs has covered this in 2 out of his last 5 games against the Nets. If you want to have a look at his attempts, he's averaging 4 attempts per game. His last 2 games, though, 2 and 3 attempts. In terms of minutes, he's only averaging 22.5 minutes against the Nets. If we look at his last 10 games, he's playing 25.8 minutes per game. So, yeah, look, I'd probably lean to the over, to be honest, on his 3-point prop, but it's not speaking to me. It's nothing that I'm willing to bet on. Gary Harris. I did have a little bit of luck betting on Gary Harris in the first quarter the other day, but let's see what we're looking at here. So points-wise, 6.5 is his line. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. The matchup, not a great one, but he has hit in 3 of his last 4 against the Brooklyn Nets. If we want to look at his first quarter points, because I hit on that last time, check this out. So line's at 2.5. It's still plus money. He's covered this in 8 out of his last 10 games. He just needs to make 1 3-pointer here. And against the Brooklyn Nets, he's covered in 3 out of his last 4. In those games, he played 8.7 minutes in the first quarter. And in his last 10 games, he's playing 8.5 minutes per game. So, I don't know. Am I willing to bet on Gary Harris once again? I'm not too sure, but do we strike while the iron is hot? I'm going to take note of it, and I'll do a little bit more research into it. But Gary Harris in the first quarter could be a good play. If we move over to Franz Wagner. Now, Franz, his line's at 17.5. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 10. He's got a great matchup here against the Brooklyn Nets. And in head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 5 out of his last 6 games against them. So that looks quite positive. Funnily enough, looking at his last 10, I said the very same thing against the Washington Wizards. So he hadn't been playing very good prior to that. But previous matchups against Washington, he was killing them. And we're seeing similar type of numbers here for Brooklyn. So I don't know, it might be something that we take. Possibly not. Might even just shortlist it. Let's not rule things out so early. Franz Wagner points. So I'll see if there's any more supporting data I can find to take this pick because, you know, players like this that are inconsistent, you just need to find the right matchup. And sometimes as a particular team, we know defensively the Nets might struggle with Franz. So it could be a good pick. Looking at his assist prop, that line's at 3.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. Does have a good matchup. And he's hit in 4 out of his last 6 against the Nets. His rebound prop is at 4.5, 5 out of his last 10. Great matchup, and he's covered in 5 out of his last 6 against the Nets. So another one you could potentially look at is maybe his points, rebounds, and assists. His PRA, minus 105. He's covered in 4 out of his last 6 against Brooklyn. And looking at his last 10, he's covered in 3 out of his last 10. So I probably wouldn't look at that. I think his points prop, probably the best one. Based off what I'm looking at there. Maybe points plus assists. Shit, I don't know. I'll look into Franz a bit later. Paolo Banchero. Let's check this boy out. He's got a tough matchup here against Brooklyn. He's hit in 6 out of his last 10 games. Head-to-head matchups, he's covered in only one of his last four, so he's gone under in 3 straight games against the Brooklyn Nets. In terms of matchup, Dorian Finney-Smith might pick him up. Some pretty good defender. Nick Claxton supporting him there, so yeah, I'd probably lean to the under on Banchero. 22.5 though. If that was any higher, I'd definitely take it. 22.5. A little bit hesitant. He has covered this line at 56% so far this year. So, but once again, it's a difficult matchup, right? So I'd probably lean to the under. Let me take note of that. I'm going to take down a lot of people's names. Let's not fuck around today. Under in points. Looking at his assist prop, that line's at 5.5. Tough matchup against Brooklyn. 3 out of his last 10, he's gone over. Against the Brooklyn Nets, he's covered in only one of his last 4. But the last time he played them, he did have 8 assists. Looking at his rebound prop, that's at 7.5. He's covered this in 3 of his last 10 games. The matchup isn't too bad. And he's covered in 2 out of his last 4 against Brooklyn. So I think the under in his points prop, probably what I feel most comfortable with there for Banchero, but I'll have to look into that a little bit further. Wendell Carter Jr., his points prop here is 11.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. 1 out of 2 in his last 2 games against the Brooklyn Nets. Difficult matchup here. So, yeah, I probably wouldn't be confident in taking any plays on Wendell. Quarter points, he's been pretty good for us. Look at that. His line's at 3.5. He's covered this in 8 out of his last 10 games. And check this shit out. Covered in both games against the Brooklyn Nets. So, you're looking at two made baskets there, really. So, you probably need to look into his level of activity. If he's only taken 2 shots, probably not a great play. You'd probably need to see at least 4 attempts per game from Wendell Carter Jr. But I'll take note of it. I'll check his performances, his shot attempts, and stuff like that. Might find itself in the pinned comment. First quarter points. Could be a same game multi. Carter and Gary Harris, perhaps. We shall see. We'll check his rebound prop. That's at 8.5. Tough matchup. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10, though. But he's gone under in the 2 games against Brooklyn. All right, jumping into these Nets. Let's check out Mikal Bridges. His points prop here is at 18.5. No lines for Cam Thomas just yet, so I probably wouldn't bet on any Brooklyn players until those lines are available, but he's covered this in 2 straight now, 3 out of his last 10. The matchup, not too bad against the Magic, and he's covered in 4 out of his last 5 against Orlando. His assist prop, 3.5. He's covered this in 5 straight games now. Difficult matchup against the Magic, though. 1 out of his last 5 against Orlando. And his rebound prop, that's at 3.5. He's covered in 6 of his last 10, but he's covered in 4 out of his last 5 against Orlando. You'd think he got injured because he did nothing in this last game, but I guess they got blown out. He only played 29 minutes. But I never bet on Mikal Bridges, and I'm not started now. Dorian Finney-Smith, I know a lot of people for quite some time were betting his over in points. He's doing quite well. So his line's at 8.5. It's plus money. Tough matchup against the Magic, though. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10, and he's gone under in 4 straight games against the Magic. So 3-pointers. His line's at 1.5, 4 out of his last 10, under in all games against Orlando. So DFS, we're not feeling it today, my boy. Nick Claxton, see what you got. Points line, 10.5. He's covered this in 6 consecutive games. That's pretty good. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered in only 2 of 6. That's not very good. Looking at his rebound prop, 9.5. He's covered in 4 consecutive games now, 5 of his last 10. But against the Magic, only 2 out of his last 6 going under in 3 consecutive games. So, yeah, I wouldn't feel very confident betting on any of these guys from Brooklyn. Let's jump into the next game. It's Toronto Raptors versus the Detroit Pistons. Now, there's no lines available for Toronto at the moment because Emmanuel Quickley, Gary Trent Jr., both game time decisions. RJ Barrett is also out for this one. Detroit, surprisingly, favorites in an NBA game. They're minus 3.5 for the Detroit Pistons. Asar Thompson is a game time decision in this one as well. So there's a potential for it. No, I don't know if there's going to be a blowout here, but I wouldn't take any Toronto players with any confidence is what I'm thinking. But let's check out Cade Cunningham. He's been pretty good to us. So I already know the matchup with Toronto. Difficult for points. Good matchup for assists. But his line's at 22.5. So he's covered this in 7 out of his last 10 games. And against the Raptors, he did score 30 points the last time they met. 18 points prior to that. So one of his last 2. His 3-point prop, he killed us in the last game. Needed him for 2.5. I think if you want plus money, you're going to need the 2.5 as well. Tough matchup here against Toronto. In his last game, I think he was 2 from yeah, 2 from 10. I just needed one more three-pointer from this guy. Absolutely killed me. But yeah, 2.5 plus 170 head-to-head matches. He's covered in one out of his last two. So yeah, I'm not feeling good about it. Assist-wise, he does have a good matchup here though, but the odds are at minus 130. So lines at 7.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. Good against the Raps. Had 12 assists against them last time. 4 assists the game prior to that. He only played 26 minutes though. So does have a good record against the Raptors. Well, his last game was great. 7 out of his last 10. Does have a terrific matchup here. I'd obviously lean to the over, but minus 130. Yeah, I'm not really feeling it. But if we look at his rebound prop, that's at 4.5. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10. Does have a good matchup against the Raps. Had 3 rebounds against them last time. 5 rebounds prior to that. So plus money to get the 4.5. But you might want to just take his rebounds plus assists, and you get 12.5 for plus 100. He's hit that in 6 out of his last 10, 1 out of his last 2 against the Raptors. So 12.5. You'd be banking on a lot of assists because chances are he doesn't get a lot of rebounds though, but he does have a good matchup for both of these. Yeah, I'm a little bit on the fence, and I don't have that feeling inside of me saying take it. So I'm not even going to take note of that. Looking at Jaden Ivey here. Points prop at 18.5 has a good matchup here against the Raptors, but he's only covered in 1 of his last 10. Against the Raptors, he's covered in only 2 of 6 games. So in his last 10 games, he's attempting 13.6 field goals, but he's only shooting 38% from the field, 23% from deep. So he hasn't been shooting very well. So I'd be a little bit hesitant, but I'd probably lean to the under. Assist-wise, 6 out of his last 10 games, but he's covered in 6 consecutive games against the Toronto Raptors. So that's an interesting one. And looking at his rebound prop, that's at 3.5. He's only covered in 1 out of his last 10, and he's covered in 2 of 6 against the Raptors. So given how poorly he's been rebounding and shooting against this line, you might have a look at points plus rebound, see how that looks. That actually makes it worse. So if I was leaning at the under here, 2 out of his last 10 games he's covered this, and 2 of his last 6 against them. So I'd probably, honestly, but you're getting a pretty good odds for this, minus 105. But with Jaden Ivey, I'd probably be leaning the under on his 18.5 points. Going back to his last 20, 14 of his last 20 games he's gone under. But in saying that, he does have a good matchup. The Raptors are going to be weakened. Ivey can probably get those points in a very short amount of time. So don't want to take any favorites here and take their unders. Isaiah Stewart, his line's at 11.5. He's hit this in 3 of his 10 games. Looking at head-to-head matchups, he's only covered in 1 of his last 4 against the Raptors. Looking at his rebounds, line's at 6.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10 and only 1 of his last 4. Jalen Duren, his points prop 14.5. In terms of the matchup, it's not bad. Kelly Olynyk probably won't give him too many troubles, but he's only covered this in 3 of his last 10 games. In head-to-head matchups, he scored 18 points the last time they played, but he went under in the 3 games prior to that. His rebound prop is at 12.5. He's going to cover that in 3 of his last 10. Has a good matchup here. Had 7 last time they played and really went under in previous seasons. But yeah, he had a monster game, didn't he? 17 points, 20 rebounds the last time they matched up in 35 minutes. These days, he's seeing about 28.9 minutes per game. So yeah, I think the line is just about right, but he could really explode. This is the type of game where he could get a lot, but a lot of these young guys can be very inconsistent. So from this particular game, nothing's really grabbing at me. Not grabbing my attention, unfortunately. Denver versus Miami. So Jimmy Butler's a game time decision in this game. Tyler Hero, Kevin Love are still out. Denver minus 4.5 favorites, though. So let's jump into it and see what we like. For Miami, we've only got lines for Jimmy and Bam Adebayo. What's Jimmy suffering from anyway? So Jimmy suffering from an illness, so not necessarily injured, but impacted by something. The matchup, difficult. His line's at 21.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10 games, 3 of his last 8 games against the Denver Nuggets. Turning to his assist prop, it's 5.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. The matchup is difficult, but he's covered in 5 of his last 8. Rebound-wise, 5 of his last 8 as well, and 6 out of his last 10 he's covered in. For Jimmy, you can find a bit of success sometimes if you do these combos. So if you want to look at rebounds plus assists, 6 out of his last 10, and also 5 out of his last 8. So the combos did not help us, but Look, if Jimmy's suffering from an illness, I'd be pretty hesitant to take any bets on him anyway. Bio, before looking at the numbers, my gut would probably say take the over in points. The matchup against the Nuggets is a good one. He has only covered in 5 of his last 10, has gone under in 4 consecutive games. He is playing. He's got the game time. His shot attempts, probably not as high as I would like them to be, but his shot percentage has been quite poor in a few of them. But check this out. Against the Nuggets, he's now covered in 6 consecutive games. 7 out of his last 8 he's gone over in those games, averaging 18 shot attempts per game. So at the moment in his last 10, he's only shooting the ball 14 times per game. But if we can see him take 18 shots, chances are that he covers. But played 35 minutes against Washington. Miami lost that game, and Bam only shot the ball 14 times. That Washington matchup is a much easier matchup than this Denver one, but I also feel like there could be a strategy in play to make Jokic work on defense to limit what he does on the offensive end. So Bam Adebayo will hopefully keep doing what he has been doing. But 19.5, I'd probably say that the line is just about right. Yeah, I'd obviously lean to the over on that one. Looking at his rebound prop, 10.5. It's plus money, but he's only covered in 2 of his last 10, and he's covered in 4 of his last 8 against the Nuggets. His assist line, 3.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10, and only 2 of his last 8 against Denver. Jumping into some of these Nuggets, we'll go with Jamal Murray first. So matchup somewhat difficult, but Jamal lines at 22.5, covering in 6 of his last 10. Against the Heat, he's gone under in 3 consecutive games, covering in only 2 of his last 7. Looking at his assist prop, 6.5. He's covered this in 5 consecutive games now, covering in 6 of his last 10. Has passed the ball quite well against Miami in the past too. Check that out. 5 out of his last 7 games, he's gone over. His rebound prop, that's at 4.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10, but in head-to-head matchups, 3 of his last 7. So this is a pretty interesting one. What I'd be thinking is, like, if you look at his assist prop, I'd be questioning why have we seen a sudden increase in the last 5 games. If we're looking at the matchup here, good matchup against Phoenix. The matchup's not bad against Boston. A great matchup against Utah. And one of the best matchups in basketball against the Toronto Raptors. Miami, not necessarily the best matchup, but it's not a difficult one either. He's obviously done it in the past. Last game against Miami, he only played 14 minutes. Chances are he would have extended that to 6 assists. Like 3 assists in 14 minutes played. I think he would have been on track for 7 to 8. So definitely lean to the over here, but the line for Jamal Murray is only minus 140. So you're not getting too much value out of that. But it could be something that we add to some parlays. It really could be. So Jamal Murray assists. Some people might take it as a single, but those people probably care more about their hit rate than the actual profit they generate. So, what else have we got? KCP, we'll check his points prop. He's hit that in 4 of his last 5, I believe. Yes, he has. 4 out of his last 5, 6 out of his last 10. Matchup against Miami is not too bad. Has covered in his last 2 against them. 3 out of his last 8, though. His 3-point market, 1.5. Plus money, 5 out of his last 10. 4 out of his last 8. So he does have a good matchup here against the Heat. If we look at his last 10 games, and we look at his attempts, he's taking on average 4 attempts per game. So you really need him to shoot 50%. In his last 10 games, he's shooting 41% from the field. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. Unless you can find reason that he's going to take more shots, then I probably wouldn't touch that. Michael Porter Jr., his points prop 15.5 in this game. Somewhat difficult matchup. He's covered in 7 of his last 10. And scored 30 points the last time he played Miami. He's covered in 3 out of his last 8 against them. So looking at his rebound prop, 6.5 to the line, 7 out of his last 10. He's covered in 4 out of his last 8 against Miami. But he's rebounded quite well the last 2 games against them. So that's quite interesting. And his 3-point prop lines at 2.5, 5 out of his last 10, but only 2 of 8 against Miami. So a lot of layups. A lot of middies, perhaps. So his points and rebounds prop, he's done quite well in his last few games against Miami. Last 2 games, 16 points, 13 rebounds, then 30 points and 11 rebounds. Looking at his last 10, he's covered this in 7 out of his last 10. The matchup is somewhat difficult, but we're trending in the right direction. Line's at 22.5. He's only come close to that really once. That's against Utah. 19 points, 4 boards, 22.5. I don't mind this. His rebounding numbers aren't too bad. The matchup somewhat difficult, but keeping in mind the matchup is most likely already factored into them. And what I also want to do is I don't want to just bet on the most obvious plays, because what I found is when I bet on the most obvious plays, other people seem to bet it as well, and it seems to blow up in our face. So I need to apply some sweet science and some gut feel. My gut feel tells me Michael Porter Jr. can have a big game here against Miami. Aaron Gordon. The Gordon's played quite well in his last 10. He's covered this 7 times. The matchup, not too bad against Miami, but he has personally gone 3 out of his last 7 over this line. So that doesn't give me some good juju. Rebound-wise, line's at 6.5, 3 out of his last 10, but he has rebounded well against the Heat, 5 out of his last 7. I'm not interested in taking that, to be honest. Looking at Nikola Jokic, points props, only at 24.5. We've seen it a lot higher these days. Does have a difficult matchup, though. He's covered this in 5 or 6 consecutive games, 5 consecutive games, 7 out of his last 10. And against Miami, he's covered this in 5 out of his last 8. Looking at his assists, his line's at 8.5, 6 out of his last 10. Difficult matchup here against the Heat. And he's gone under in 5 out of his last 8. So only hitting this 3 times. And his rebound prop, he's at 12.5. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10. And only 2 of his last 8 against Miami. So he's got a difficult matchup for points and assists. Rebound-wise, it's not too difficult, but if we just have a look at his points plus assists. Against Miami, he's actually 4 out of his last 8. His last 10, 7 of his last 10. So the matchup is difficult, which is why his line's a little bit lower. But he's been getting it done recently. Last 3 games against Miami haven't been great, though. So, yeah, for Jokic, I'm not feeling you, my boy. So in this particular game, Michael Porter Jr. points and rebounds probably has my attention. But I'll look into that a little bit more a bit later on. The next one's the Chicago Bulls versus the Indiana Pacers. In this game, a couple players out and game time decisions, but they're all relatively bench players. So a lot of the key players you'd normally bet on will be in this game. We'll start with Kobe White. Check out Kobe. So his points prop 20.5. The matchup's not too bad against Indiana, but he's covered in 3 of his last 10. He's only covered in 1 of his last 6 against them. His 3-point prop, because he knows he likes to jack these things up, line's at 2.5, 4 out of his last 10, but only 1 of his last 6 against the Pacers. The Pacers don't allow many 3-pointers. Looking at his assist prop, Pacers don't allow too many of these to point guards. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10, but he's gone under. Look at that, by a long way in all games against the Pacers. And then we look at his rebound prop. That's at 4.5, 6 out of his last 10, and 1 of his last 6 against Indiana. So what I'm thinking here is I'm leaning towards an under to do a combination on Kobe White. So if we just look at his PRA, he's gone under in 6 consecutive games against the Pacers. With these games, he played 33 minutes. Those games, he wasn't too bad, actually. And looking at his last 10, 3 of his last 10. So I feel like points is probably the biggest outlier. So I might look at just his rebounds plus assists. So he's covered this in 5 out of his last 10, but he's gone under by a long way against the Indiana Pacers. So it's at 10.5. Looking at the under, it's minus 119. So, yeah, I think I might check out the Kobe White unders here. No, my luck, he'll probably fuck around and get a triple-double, but let's see how we go. Ayo Dosunmu. Points props at 13.5, covering in 6 of his last 10. Does have a good matchup here against the Pacers. Scored 15 points against them last time, but covered in 2 of his last 6. Now, a lot of people have been betting on his 3-point prop lately. I did in the last game against Dallas. He only made 1, but still 7 out of his last 10 he's hit on. But tough matchup against the Pacers here. They don't allow many 3-pointers, and he's gone under this in 6 consecutive games against Indiana. But in those games, a couple of games he played less minutes, averaging 1.8 attempts. In his last 10, he's averaging 6 attempts per game. So, yeah, I wouldn't bet on the under, but I'd be hesitant to bet the over, I tell you that. Looking at his assist prop, 5.5. He's covered in 7 of his last 10. He's covered in 1 of his last 6 against Indiana. So went under in 5 straight games. His rebound props at 3.5. 4 out of his last 10. 4 out of his last 6 against the Pacers. So, yeah, for Dosunmu, I'm not really feeling that. Where's DeMar DeRozan? His points prop here is at 23.5. So everybody that we've kind of gone through so far does have a somewhat difficult matchup. I assume DeMar DeRozan will probably have an easier matchup. They don't defend the wings forwards quite well. Now, he's covered his points prop here in 7 of his last 10. And against the Pacers, he's only hit in 1 of his last 5. Looking at his assist prop, 6 out of his last 10 games he's gone over. Only 2 of his last 5 against the Pacers. So even that, a little bit hesitant. And his rebound prop, 4.5. 5 out of his last 10. 3 out of his last 5 against the Pacers. So, yeah, I've been betting on DeMar quite a bit recently, but I'm not feeling that one. I've got to be honest with you. Nikola Vucevic, his points prop, 20.5. Somewhat difficult matchup here. The Pacers don't allow too many points to centers. He has covered this in 7 out of his last 10 games. That's not too bad at all. But against the Pacers, he's covered in 1 of his last 5. Good news, if you do like Vucevic, he did cover in his last game against Indiana, if that means anything to you. His rebound prop, 11.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Tough matchup, but did have 17 rebounds the last time they played. Prior to that, he went under in 4 straight games. And then if you look at his assists, he's covered in 4 out of his last 10. And in head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 5 consecutive games against the Pacers. So will that run continue? I do not know. But yeah, for this particular, for the Bulls, not loving too many of them. We'll go through the players that I feel more likely to hit. So I'm not spending 5 hours doing this preview, but Tyrese Halliburton, points prop is at 18.5. He's got a tough matchup here against the Bulls, but he's covered in his last 3 games against them. Looking at his assist prop, that's up to 11.5. 4 out of his last 10, somewhat difficult matchup. Had 20 assists in his last game against the Bulls, covering in 2 out of his last 5. And then his rebound prop, if you're interested in that, it's 3.5. 4 out of his last 10. And in head-to-head games, 2 out of his last 5. So, yeah, nothing too arousing going on there. Pascal Siakam does have a good matchup here, but he has been tough to bet on, I tell you that. Line's at 20.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. He's yet to verse the Bulls since joining the Pacers. His assist prop's at 3.5. It's plus money. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. And his rebound prop is 7.5, covering in 6 out of his last 10. Does have an excellent matchup here against the Pacers. I just don't know if I'm man enough to take that. But look, this is the best matchup in basketball for power forwards if you're looking at rebound props. So I'm going to have to look at it. You can't ignore it completely, but I am hesitant. But I'll take a closer look into Pascal. All right, so we're jumping into the Cleveland Cavaliers versus New Orleans Pelicans. I've only got lines for Donovan Mitchell on the board at the moment, which means he's a game time decision. And yes, he is. So no other lines available for the Cavs game. All right, let's take a look at D. Mitch. I think he has a knee injury, I believe. So let's see what we're looking at here. Points line, 25.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. Doesn't have a too difficult appear against the Pelicans. He did score 30 points against them last time, covering in 1 of his last 2. His 3-point prop, 3.5. It's plus money. 7 out of his last 10. Does have a good matchup here against them. Has gone under in 2 games against them, though. In those games, shot pretty poorly, 33% from the field. If we look at his last 10, he's shooting 46% from deep, and he's covered this in 7 out of his last 10. So Donovan Mitchell to get over 3.5 3-pointers made. He is on the road, so I'd be a bit hesitant around that. Look at his last 10 road games, 5 out of his last 10. Let's look at his assist prop. That's at 4.5. He's covered in 8 of his last 10. Does have a good matchup here against the Pels, but has gone under in his last 2 against them. His rebound prop, 4.5. 6 out of his last 10. 1 of his last 2 against the Pels. So not ticking all the boxes for me, Donovan Mitchell, but he's also coming back from injury, so I'd be a little bit hesitant to bet on that. CJ McCollum, his points prop, 15.5. 4 out of his last 10. A matchup against Cleveland, somewhat difficult, but he has covered in 2 out of his last 3. His 3-point market's at 2.5. 7 out of his last 10. 1 out of his last 3 against them. Assists, lines at 3.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. The matchup is difficult, but he has gone over in 3 straight games against them. And if you look at his rebound prop, 7 out of his last 10 games, 5 in a row, but only 1 of his last 3 against the Pelicans. Sorry, the Cavaliers, not the Pelicans. My Lord. Brandon Ingram, let's check out BI. So his matchup here is a difficult one. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 10 games, 19.5 points, 1 of his last 2. His assist prop, that's at 5.5. He's covered this quite well lately. 7 of his last 10. And he's covered this in his last 2 games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So minus 130, though. Not a fan of that. Looking at his rebound prop, 5 out of his last 10. 1 of his last 2. So I'm going to sit on his assist prop just for a second here. Because in his last 20 games, he's hit this in 15 of his last 20 games. He has hit it in his last 2 games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So he's been hitting it quite well. We just ignore the odds for a second because this might make the parlay play. Because I don't like betting on Brandon Ingram. I haven't had much luck with him in the past. But let's do this. I'll add it to my short list and I'll research it a little bit further later on. Ingram assists. I think I can find better odds than 130 anyway, but yeah, hope he doesn't let me down. Herb Jones, a lot of people got caught betting on his points prop the other day, and he went under against Atlanta. Points-wise, good matchup. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. He's covered in 1 of his last 2 against Cleveland. So Herb Jones doesn't take too many shots, and all it takes is Trey Murphy or Brandon Ingram to go off, or Zion Williamson. If they're having a big game, Herb Jones ain't shooting. If CJ McCollum gets hot, Herb Jones ain't shooting. Let's have a look at Zion, though. So Zion, 23.5 points. Got a difficult matchup here. He's only covered this in 3 of his last 10. He's actually yet to verse the Cleveland Cavaliers, but the matchup may not be as difficult, given there's no Evan Mobley. If it's George's Niang on him, good night. I don't even think Cleveland have anybody to body Zion, so he does have a good matchup, I would say. But yeah, I haven't bet on Zion much at all this year, to be honest. I did bet on his assist prop when he started really collecting those, but his line's at 5.5 now. 7 out of his last 10 games. He's hitting it quite well, but the matchup is a somewhat difficult one. And rebounds, I know he's seen a lift in these lately, but still wildly inconsistent. 4 of his last 10, so I wouldn't feel comfortable taking that. Jonas Valanciunas up against Jarrett Allen in this one. 10.5's the line. He's hit in 4 of his last 10. Matchup is a tough one. He has hit in 2 of his last 3 against them, though. And his rebound prop here is at 8.5. He's covered this in 8 of his last 10 games. That's pretty arousing. The matchup's not too bad. He's got under in his last 2 against Cleveland, though. And in those games, 24 and 28 minutes. In his last 10 games, Jonas only playing 20 minutes a night. So, yeah, he struggled playing more minutes before. His recent form is pretty good. The odds 135, not great either. So, yeah, I'd be a bit hesitant to bet on Jonas Valanciunas despite his good recent form. I'll watch the market closely. I'll see what the line does. I'll see what he finishes on, and hopefully I was right by not choosing to play it. We're going to jump into the next game. It's the Charlotte Hornets versus the always injured Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies missing most people, so my God. Charlotte also, Trey Mann, he's a game time decision in this game. So the Hornets 2-point favorites, despite them having a lot of people out. This game's an absolute mess, but let's see what we can find here. Vasily Micic. So he's been pretty good these days. Look at this. Points props at 10.5. He's covered this in 6 consecutive games. The matchup's not too bad against Memphis for point guards. Trey Mann is a game time decision, so I'm assuming based on the line that Trey Mann's most likely going to play. His last 3 games with Trey Mann, he's gone over this line, though. So, yeah, I definitely lean to the over on this based on what I'm seeing. But, yeah, 6 straight games. He's playing about 30 minutes a night. And the matchup's not too bad. I can't see why this line is set the way it is, but this also could be a trap. He did score 18 points against Memphis when they last played in February as well. So I'm going to copy and paste this into my shortlist. Might be onto something here. Looking at his assist prop, I know he doesn't shoot 3-pointers, so I'm not looking at that. Ooh, 7.5 is his assist prop. He's only hit this in 1 of his last 10 games. Good matchup against Memphis. And check this out. Had 9 assists in that game against the Memphis Grizzlies as well. But I think his points prop just makes a lot more sense. There's a lot more green. And green means good. Rebound prop, 3.5. Good matchup against Memphis. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10. He only had 1 rebound against them last time. So his points prop probably interests me the most. So I'm going to look into his activity, shot attempts, all that good stuff. Let's have a look at Nick Richards' points and rebounds. Points props at 10.5. Matchup, it is a pretty good matchup. No Jaren Jackson Jr. though. So, well, it could be, right? Jaren Jackson Jr., Pippen, Stevens, Watanabe, Vince Williams, they're all game time decisions in this one. So who the fuck knows what's going on with Memphis? Nick Richards, 4 of his last 10 and 1 of his last 3 against them. His rebound prop, that's 10 boards as well. 6 out of his last 10. Has a good matchup here, but has gone under in 3 straight games against Memphis. So that's not getting my attention. Brandon Miller, Charlotte on the road in this one. I told you last time against Detroit that he's on the road, so he's probably struggle. Didn't struggle, but he went under his points line. 19.5 is what we see today. The matchup's not too bad against the Grizzlies, but we don't know who's going to be playing. If Vince Williams is playing, Vince Williams will probably most likely pick up Brandon Miller, I imagine. But he's covered this in 4 of his last 10. Scored 18 points against Memphis last time. Looking at his assist prop, 2.5, 6 out of his last 10 went under against Memphis. And his rebound prop, 4.5. He has covered that in 6 consecutive games. And he did rebound well against Memphis last time with 6 boards. So, yeah, that's an interesting one. Hasn't had tough opposition, though. Pretty weak teams. Like Toronto, Washington, Brooklyn, Detroit. They ain't making the playoffs. The matchup has been pretty good. Points-wise, I'd probably lean to the under on that one. That might be what I'd feel most comfortable with. But you're looking at minus 115 odds. But you'd also want to make sure Vince Williams is in before you take that bet. Miles Bridges, points props at 22.5. Difficult matchup against Memphis. Has covered in 3 straight, 4 of his last 10. Scored 25 points against the Grizzlies last time. His rebound prop is at 8.5. I bet he's 8.5 last time against the Pistons, and he only had 7. My God. 6 boards against Memphis last time. So, look, I'd probably lean to the over. I'm looking at his last 20 games. He has had stretches where he does rebound poorly, though. So, I just think he'd lean over just in spite of me. But anyway, it's not about me, is it? All right, we've got the Golden State Warriors versus the Dallas Mavericks. Steph Curry is still out for this one. Dallas relatively healthy, so let's get into it, shall we? We'll start with these Golden State Warriors. We'll start with CP3. Good matchup here against Dallas. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10. He scored 24 points the last time he played Dallas. That was in a great game by CP3. I'll probably lean to the over, but not with too much confidence. His assist prop is at 8.5. Good matchup here against Dallas. 2 out of his last 10. Only had 6 assists against Dallas last time. And his rebound props at 4.5. 2 out of his last 10 games. Only 2 rebounds against Dallas last time. So if you are capping this game on your own and you're using Outlier to go through it all, play around with the filters and check to see how all of these guys play without Steph Curry. So Klay Thompson, he's a perfect example. So check this out. His line's at 21.5 now. It has been moving up the last 3 games without Steph. He did cover his line in each of these games, but now that moved, showing an under. But the matchup is a good one against the Dallas Mavericks. He has covered in 4 out of his last 10 in head-to-head matches. He has gone under in 4 straight. But check this out. Games without Steph Curry. We see Klay Thompson has now covered in 5 out of his last 10, but he's had some pretty big games, and he's yet to verse Dallas without Steph in the lineup. His 3-point prop, 4.5 3-pointers, plus money though. 5, 5, and 4 in his last 3 games, averaging 9 attempts per game in his last 10. If you check to see what he's doing without the chef, last 10 games without Steph Curry, he's averaging 10 attempts per game. So he'd need to hit 5 of them and shoot 50%. His last 10, he's only 38% from the field. So I wouldn't take that. Let's check out Andrew Wiggins. His points prop is at 13.5. Points prop, 6 out of his last 10, he's covered this 13.5. 1 out of his last 3 against Dallas. Rebound-wise, you're looking at 4.5. 3 out of his last 10. 1 out of his last 3 against the Mavs. So, yeah, I'm not liking what I'm seeing from Andrew Wiggins. And the come bucket, Jonathan Kuminga, 21.5. Pretty good matchup here against Dallas. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. Against Dallas, he's covered in 1 out of his last 4. His rebound props, 5.5. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. Good matchup. 2 out of his last 4 against the Mavs. And his assist prop, good matchup once again, but only 4 of his last 10 games. I had 3 assists against the Mavs the last time they played, though. So Kuminga, I feel like his lines are pretty much spot on. And I say that because I don't think they're too low. I don't think they're too high. You really got to dive in a little bit further to find an edge. But let's have a look at Draymond. Line's at 7.5. He's covered this in 2 of his last 10. Has covered this line in 3 straight games against the Dallas Mavericks, though. His assist prop, 5.5, 4 out of his last 10. Covered this in 2 of his last 3 against Dallas. And his rebound prop, 7.5, 5 out of his last 10. Only 1 of 3 against Dallas. So, yeah, I don't bet on Draymond Green that much. And I'm not starting today. Let's have a look at these Dallas Mavericks. So let's have a look at Mr. Triple Double. Luka Doncic. He's got a great matchup to score some bucks here against the Golden State Warriors. His line's at 33.5. He's covered that in 7 of his last 10. He's covered in 2 of his last 3 against the Golden State Warriors as well. This particular game, Dallas is 7.5 point favorite. So I wonder, well, he's got to be chasing these triple doubles intentionally, right? So if he is stat padding, points wise, if Dallas start to blow these guys out, he might not feed them with points. I think he's got the scoring title in the bag anyway. If we look at his assist prop, that is at 10.5 minus 128. He's hitting 7 of his last 10. Does have a good matchup, and he's covered this in 2 out of his last 3. And his rebound prop, that's at 9.5 as well. He's covered this fucking 7 straight times. But against the Warriors, he's only covered in 1 out of his last 3. I don't know. Luka's a beast. He'll probably get another triple-double again. Looking at his PRA, it's 54.5. He's covered this in 8 out of his last 10 games. Obviously, he's getting a triple-double, so he's covering his rebounds and his assist line every single time. And most of the time, he's covering his points prop as well. Head-to-head matchups, he has covered this PRA in 2 of his last 3. The game he went under, 30 points, 17 assists, and 7 rebounds, finishing on the hook. My Lord. So Dallas is 7.5 point favorites. They are at home here, so I don't know. They could blow the Warriors out and end Luka's streak. I wonder what triple double's paying. Now it's only plus 155. So let me know in the comment section if you guys are down to take Luka Doncic triple double. I just had a look. I'm getting plus 155 odds anyway, so I'm not going to take it, but I do hope he hits it because that's pretty crazy. Have a look at Kyrie Irving. Matchup's not too bad against Golden State, but he has gone under this line in 4 consecutive games now, so he's a little bit cold at the moment. 5 out of his last 10. His 3-point prop did let me down against the Chicago Bulls. It's at 2.5. He had hidden 7 of his last 10. Matchup's not the greatest, but again, not a difficult one. His assist prop's down to 3.5, so that's dropped. He's only covered in 3 of his last 10, so fair enough. And his rebound prop's at 4.5, and he's covered in 5 out of his last 10. So, yeah, I'm not really feeling that. You probably look at actually Kyrie Irving under in his PRA, purely because Luka's just on a rampage at the moment. For this guy to get 33.5 PRA, I don't feel like it's required, to be honest. Matchup is difficult for his rebounds and assists. So who knows? He might find himself chasing Klay Thompson around. He's not going to be in position to get some boards. So Kyrie's my favorite player, though, but I'm going to add it to the short list. Kyrie Irving under PRA. Let's do it. Let's have a look at this one a little bit later. All right. Daniel Gafford. Now, this is my man. I love betting on Daniel Gafford. I just hope not everyone does too. So he's starting in this game. Checking to see, is Derek Lively still out? He's not. So Derek Lively's going to be playing, but Gafford's going to be starting by the looks of it. So that's interesting. So he had a great game against the Bulls, 20 points. I think, let me see if he's missed a shot, because I think he might have the longest streak. Yeah. So this now for Daniel Gafford is the longest streak in Dallas Mavericks history, I believe, in field goals made consecutively. So he's at 12, 19, 28 field goals from 28 attempts now from Daniel Gafford. So he needs at least 5 field goals attempted in this game to cover this line of 9.5. Pretty easy when you're just dunking it all the time, but I guess his minutes is what I'm questioning at the moment. If we look at his last 5, he's playing 20 minutes a night. So he's only going to play 20 minutes. Can he make 5 dunks? That's what you're really betting on in this one. So, yeah, I'd be a little bit hesitant. We don't know how many minutes Lively will get if he is playing. So rebound-wise, he's covered in 1 of his last 5. So a bit hesitant to take that. But his points prop does interest me because he's just dunking the ball every single time. It's very easy for him. And Luka's got to get his assist somehow, right? So I'll probably lean the over on Daniel Gafford, but yeah, the Lively thing concerns me. So what that says in my gut saying don't do it, so I'm probably not going to. So this particular game, obviously Luka triple double is probably a great play, but I wouldn't think honestly if that hits, I wouldn't feel good about it anyway. I'm like, it feels like the most obvious play in the world. He's hit like 7 triple doubles in a row. To bet on him to do it again, I feel like I don't know. I just feel like you're not working right. You can be somebody who just watches ESPN every night, and you'd bet on Luka to get a triple double. Like I ain't about that life. I've actually haven't been winning much lately, so maybe I should just be a casual. But research like a pro, bet like a casual is what I always say. This next game, Atlanta Hawks versus the Portland Trailblazers. Jalen Johnson's a game time decision in this one. So is Jeremy Grant. So most of the other players are available at the moment. So let's see what we're looking at here. We'll start with Portland. DeAndre Ayton has been playing quite well from the games I've seen. Yeah, check this out. Line's at 17.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. Atlanta only 3.5 point favorites. So Ayton should get a lot of run in this game. He's yet to verse Portland. Not Portland. He's yet to verse Atlanta since joining the Portland Trailblazers. So I don't hate that. I'll probably look into that one a little bit further because I have liked what I've seen. He has been quite aggressive. Shot attempts, look at that. Last 2 games, 25 and then 19 shot attempts. If we can get, I'd say close to 17 shot attempts, I think we're looking good here. And his rebound prop though, 12.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. He's got a good matchup, but he has been rebounding quite well as of late. So yeah, it's not too bad. DeAndre Ayton he's not worth his money, but if he keeps doing that, he probably would be. Jeremy Grant, 18.5 points is his line. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Matchup's pretty good against Atlanta. Covered in 1 of his last 2 against them. But Jeremy Grant, I think his assist prop might be okay. Yeah, so look at that. 7 out of his last 10 games, he's covered 2.5. It's minus 174 though, so it's not something I'd consider taking. Plus, he's on the injury list. Anthony Simons. So a lot of people bet his over against Boston. The matchup was good. I almost did, but it was one of the leans that I avoided, and thank God for that. But this one, 23.5 points is the line. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. Atlanta has got a great matchup. He only scored 21 points when they last played. In that game, he only shot the ball 12 times, making 8 of them. In his last 10 games, he's shooting the ball on average 19 times per game. So he's only making 8 shots, but he's shooting the ball a lot. So this particular game is one where I'd probably lean to the over, to be honest. But I don't want to take 2 players from the same team to both go over, right? So I do like what I'm seeing from DeAndre Ayton. The data tells us that Anthony Simons is probably due for a good game here based on his activity in the matchup. But from what I've seen in the eye test, DeAndre Ayton doesn't look too bad. Scoot Henderson, so he recently came back. His line's at 15.5. He's gone under in 6 straight. Played 2 games now since he's come back from injury, scoring 13 points in both of them. Looking at his assists, so the last 2 games we're really interested in. 5.5, 3 of his last 10, 1 out of his last 2. And his rebound props at 3.5. He had 6 rebounds against Boston, but yeah, you'd have to be a madman to have a read on Scoot Henderson rebounds. So I ain't feeling that. Jumping into these Atlanta Hawks, DeJounte Murray. Let's take a look at you, my boy. So he's covered this line in 2 of his last 10. Did have a 41 point against Memphis and then 23 against the Pels. The matchup's not too bad here against Portland, but DeJounte Murray scored 40 points the last 2 games against the Portland Trailblazers. Goddamn. In those games, he shot 65% from the field, took 20-plus attempts in both of them. His last 3 games, he's taken 20 shots. Just hasn't been able to get it to fall. But, yeah, DeJounte Murray to go over in points here, I don't mind it, right? Because, yeah, he might not be shooting well, but he's shooting a lot. So he's going to get a lot of opportunities here. Let's do this, right? This is another way you can use outlier. If you think so, get active with it, put up a lot of shots. I apologize if my dog is snoring, but that's what she's all about. So shots and minutes. How many minutes is this guy playing as of late, actually? DeJounte Murray is... Sheesh. Let's go to 37 minutes, see what happens. Last 10 games where he's played at least 37 minutes, what do we see? He's only cut 3 of his last 10, so that's not exciting. But 40 points against Portland, though. So I think given the 2 games against Portland, I need to dive into into that a little bit further to figure out what's going on there. All right, let's jump into his assist prop. The line on this one is at 8.5. Got a pretty good matchup here against Portland, covering in 5 of his last 10, but obviously he's got under in his last 2 because he shot the ball 25 fucking times. So, yeah, I wouldn't take that. Points plus assist, perhaps, because if he explodes on the points front, he might fall a little bit short on the assist side of things, but if he does get close to both, he's got a good matchup for assists here. Doesn't have to score 40 points in order to cover it. You might take points plus assists, 34.5. Getting better odds, but you have to get an extra stat out of it. 2 out of his last 10, but as you know, he's covered this in points alone in his last 2 games against Portland. It's just crazy. He's only hit this 4 times out of his last 20 games. I feel like if you're looking at probability, 4 of his last 20, it's only a 20% hit rate. These sportsbooks, man, they set these lines for a reason. So I feel like taking the over. The numbers are obviously telling me not to, but I feel like it, right? I'm gonna put it on my short list. We'll put it on my short list. Also, Jalen Johnson coming back. I wonder what that does to his lines. Check out Bogdan Bogdanovic. He's got a good matchup here. He's covered in 2 out of his last 10, 1 out of his last 2 against Portland. His 3-point prop, 3.5. He's only hit that in 1 of his last 10 games and 1 of 2 against Portland. His assist props at 3.5. Odds aren't great, but he's only hit in 5 of his last 10 and 1 of his last 2 against Portland. So Bogdanovic, not feeling you, my man. And let's have a look at Clint Capella. So his line is 12.5 in this game. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. He's gone under in 2 straight games against Portland. His rebound prop, 11.5. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10. He has hit this in both games against the Trailblazers. So, yeah, I'm not really loving that, to be honest. For Clint Capella, I feel like he's aging very quickly. He's probably not even 30 yet, but I feel like he's aging faster than he should be. We'll jump into the last game, though. It's the Los Angeles Lakers versus Sacramento Kings. And as usual, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, game time decision. Keegan Murray is a game time decision as well. So, Kings are on a back-to-back. The Lakers 1.5-point favorites in this one. So we'll start off with the Lakers first. So D'Angelo Russell, my God, this dog is snoring louder and louder. Deep sleeper. All right, let's check out D'Lo. His line's at 16.5. The matchup's not a bad one against the Kings. He's hit this in 8 of his last 10. Scored 10 points against them last time, though, but prior to that, I absolutely gave him the business. His 3-point props at 2.5. It is plus money. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10. Kings don't allow too many 3-pointers, though, and he's only hit this in 1 of his last 3 against them. His assist prop, 5.5. The odds aren't too bad here. 6 of his last 10. Good matchup against the Kings, but he's only hit in 1 of his last 3. So points prop, probably the best one there for D'Lo. Did have 10 points against the last time, but I don't think that doesn't mean that's going to happen again. Austin Reeves, points prop for him is at 14.5. I feel like it is. He's got a good matchup. He's covered this in 5 consecutive games now. Against the Kings, he's covered in 2 out of his 4. Did score 18 points against them in their last matchup. Just looking at his field goal attempts, yeah, he takes a decent number. In his last 5, yeah, it's not like he's taken a lot more. Looks like he's just scoring more effectively. But that's not bad. I don't mind that for Austin Reeves. His assist prop, 5.5. 4 out of his last 10 and 1 of his last 4 against the Kings. So I don't like that. Check out King James. I wonder if he's on PEDs. I've been listening and reading a few articles about it. Is LeBron James on steroids? It would explain a lot, but yeah. Looking at the matchup, though. Matchup against the Kings is not too bad. Not great either, but he's hit in 6 out of his last 10 games, 26.5. That line's a little bit higher than it has been as of late. Head-to-head matchups against the Kings, he's hit this in 6 consecutive ones. I think I bet on his over the last time they played, actually, now that I think about it. This is a road game for the Lakers, so you might fuck around with the outlier and say, show me the Kings road games only. And he's hit this in 5 out of his last 10 games on the road. So I'd obviously still lean to the over. But let's check out his other props. Assist-wise, line's at 8.5, 7 out of his last 10. Against the Kings, he's covered in 4 out of his last 6. So he's killed it the last 2 games. Plenty of assists right there. And if you look at his rebound prop, this is where he's a bit inconsistent. 4 out of his last 10. 4 out of his last 6 against the Kings. So what I would be looking at, because LeBron's always going to score some points, right? Even when he has pretty poor games, he's scoring close to 20 points. Assist wise, he's always going to be around there. But when he has great games, like he did against the Kings last time, he had 13 assists. Prior to that, he had 12, I believe. So you might take his points plus assists because he's going to command the ball a lot on the offensive end. And he's covered his points plus assist line in 8 of his last 10 games. He's also covered it in 6 consecutive games against the Kings. If he doesn't show up on the offensive side scoring the ball, at least you know that the assists are going to be there. He's never going to be under into these props, I believe, in my opinion. And points prop, he can easily explode on that. So LeBron James, I've already talked myself into it. I'll most likely take the over on you for points plus assists. Long live the king. All right. Where's the glass man? Anthony Glass Davis. Street clothes Davis, right? All right. He's got a difficult matchup to score some points against the Kings. He's only hit this 24.5 in 4 of his last 10. He's gone under in 3 or 4 games against Sacramento. Absolutely struggled in the 2 games this season, too. Played 34 minutes in both of them. Didn't take many shots, and he shot terribly from the field. If you want to look at Anthony Davis just on the road, yeah, he's covered in 5 of his last 10 road games, but I would honestly lean to the under here for AD because I'm not a massive fan of his. Rebound-wise, against the bonus, he does have a good matchup here. Had 25 rebounds against the Timberwolves last time. 4 out of his last 10, and he's covered in 2 of his last 4. But both this season, he's gone under his rebound line. And if you look at his assist prop, the line's at 2.5. He's covered that quite well in his last 4 games. Head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 2 out of his last 4. So I'd personally be thinking, let's take the under at Anthony Davis points plus rebounds, 38.5. He's hit the 48% this season. He's hit that in 40% of his last 20 games, and he's only hit that in 20% of his last 5. He had this monster 27 and 25 against the Timberwolves. I believe Rudy Gobert was out for that game, so he just took advantage of whoever's in the middle. Domantas Sabonis, not the most imposing player, but shit, Anthony Davis has had his struggles with him in the past. He has covered this in 1 of his last 4 games, though. I've actually talked myself out of taking this bet because we know what he's capable of against Domantas Sabonis. Last 2 games haven't been great. There's a chance that he just aims up here. So, yeah, I'm not going to fade AD, but I think he's going to go under. I'm just not going to take that bet. Looking at De'Aaron Fox, his points prop 26.5. The matchup against the Lakers is a good one. He's covered this points line in 8 of his last 10 games. And against the Lakers, he's covered in 6 out of his last 7. So, yeah, I'm loving De'Aaron Fox points. I've watched enough De'Aaron Fox games to know that he's not fucking passing that ball if his life depends on it. So, especially if he's feeling it, those shots are going to be going up. The Lakers pretty soft defensively on the outside, so De'Aaron Fox can get inside whenever he wants. Looking at his assist prop, though, 5.5's the line. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. Has had some luck against the Lakers in the past, but has gone under in his... So, looking at his rebound prop, 4.5. He's covered in 8 of his last 10 games, but only in 2 of 7 against the Lakers. So you could just play his points prop at minus 119. You could play his points plus assist prop because he's more than capable of covering this with just points alone. I personally got burnt on his assists already against the Lakers. I remember that game. I think one of these was an overtime game, I believe, and he still didn't get any assists. Absolutely killed me. Last leg of my parlay. Damn you. But De'Aaron Fox scored some points. I can definitely mess with that. Who else is there? Kevin Huerter. He's been pretty ass lately. Malik Monk's been pretty good. He's been that good that coming off the bench, his points line's at 19.5. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games. Got a good matchup here against LA. Scored 26 points the last time they played, but has only covered in 2 of his last 6. So I'd be a little bit hesitant. Oh, actually, he was with the Lakers, so I think there's a bit of a role reversal here. But yeah, Malik Monk's been playing quite well lately. It's just, yeah, he's somewhat inconsistent though. Assist wise, he gets a fair bit of these. Lines at 5.5, 4 of his last 10, 2 of 6 in games with LA. So yeah, Malik Monk, a little bit difficult to bet on, to be honest, but he does tend to put up some great numbers. Domantas Sabonis, look at Domas, 20.5 points, covered in 3 straight, 5 of his last 10. The matchup against AD is not too difficult, but he's covered this in 3 out of his last 6. So pretty up and down. If you believe in trends like this, he's going to go over. Here's assist prop, 8.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Has a great matchup here against LA. Had 12 assists against them last time and has covered in 2 out of his last 6 games. And if you look at his rebound prop, that's at 13.5. 7 out of his last 10 games. Great matchup here against AD. And he has covered in 3 straight, 4 out of his last 6. So I don't mind this rebound prop. I know this number's quite high, but I just feel like, 3 games against LA, he's covered this with ease, really. Massive rebounding efforts. Last 10 games, he's certainly been getting busy with it, getting some boards. So I don't hate that for Delmas. I don't hate it. I don't normally take lines that high, but something inside of me is telling, have a go. Have a crack at it, my friend. So that's Delmas, Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray. I ain't fucking with them anyway. Now, how are we looking for time? Just over an hour, so not looking too bad. So back doing things BAU. Yesterday I was a little bit rushed, and you can probably see it in the video. I know a lot of you guys left comments saying that you liked it and yada, yada, yada. So I do appreciate all the love. Our subscriber goal, that next goal is at 5,000. I want to hit that before the end of March. We started this month off quite well. I think we've had close to 400 more subscribers through March. So you guys are definitely loving it. The change to the thumbnail seems to be positive. We're getting a slightly more viewers each and every single day. So everything's kind of popping in the right direction. What we do need, though, is these bets to start popping in the right direction. We had a killer 3-day set. We made 20 units in 3 days. Since that, I celebrated that win. I think we're probably down like 8 or 9 units in the 3 days. So things aren't looking great, but at the same time, I've noticed a lot of people have been struggling. The NBA has been a little bit strange as of late. So hopefully we can beat that. The gambling gods are good to us and we can hit. So in terms of when my bets will go up, if you choose to follow, I'm going to upload the video. My pinned comments and the bets should be up an hour after I post the video. So stay tuned for that. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. I appreciate if you made it this far. Peace.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to your line from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. It's all free, you don't even pay me.